Here is a lovely example,
here is
an
if you can
average
have sound,
example of
please.
somebody
Should be sound with
practicing
this.
Maharshi's Transcendental Meditation program. You can see here on the top we have an EEG tracing from the prefrontal cortex. This is the EEG of the right prefrontal cortex. And below that is the coherence from minimum to maximum. So we have coherence from minimum to maximum, and this time is about 1 minute across the scale there. And so what we can see in this, and we'll play it in just a moment, is that before they start meditating, the coherence between the left and right prefrontal cortexes oscillates at about 60% in this case. And then when they start meditating, you can see there's a change in the amplitude of the EEG, and there's also a change, a dramatic change, in the coherence from an average of about 60% to an average of about 90-95%. And then, after about 30 seconds, they're asked to stop meditating, and you can see it returns again to the eyes open, eyes closed condition of about 60%. So let's play that now. So now we're going to watch it real time. And here we go. Again, the top is the right front prefrontal cortex, EEG, and the bottom is coherence from minimum to maximum. From minimum to maximum, 0 to 100% of coherence. You can see before they start meditating, it's about 60%. And right here they started meditating. You can see the change in the amplitude of the EEG and the high levels sustained coherence between the left and right prefrontal cortexes, left and right front of the brain. And then they're going to momentarily stop meditating after about 25 seconds, 30 seconds. There, they stop meditating. You can see the rapid drop off. It's very dramatic, very clear. So again, the beginning of meditation, the onset, is high levels, sustained levels of coherence in the front of the brain. And then they return to levels, and having had this experience, the brain will have changed, and over time, the levels of activity outside of meditation will increase in the direction of higher and higher coherence related to growth of enlightenment. Now what we've done is just, in addition to the yellow line, which is the prefrontal cortex, the coherence between the left and right side of the prefrontal cortex, we've added another line here, this blue. This blue is the relationship, or the coherence between the left and right of the back of the brain. So we have the front of the brain in yellow and the back of the brain in blue. It's a little hard to see, but in this lower chart you can see both of them are going together. The yellow stays up there almost all the time, above 90%, and the blue stays up there most of the time, breaking up. So the yellow is the self-referral front executive control, self-referral. The back of the brain is more space and time, the world, more object referral. And you can see with the onset of meditation, both of them go up and stay at high levels, and then change on the end of meditation. It's a very beautiful thing. We can show that in real time and enjoy that. So here is, again, the left and right EEG, and here is the prefrontal cortex and the back of the brain between the left and right hand side. So you can see both of them on the average about 60-70%. And you'll see, started meditating. You can see immediately the alpha popping up. And again, the alpha coherence comes up at the same time within about half a second. The alpha continues along here, and you can see that the back of the brain, the world, also joins it most of the time. So again, we see that with the onset, the front of the brain becomes coherent and the back of the brain becomes coherent. And then when we stop meditating right about now, you'll see that they change back to what they were before. So now what we have is an example of two frontal EEG, and now we have four coherences. We have the front, this yellow, we have the back, this blue, and then we have the left and the right side. And you can see the person started meditating right here. We'll pause for a second. Person started meditating right here because you can see that the front went up and stayed up. Stayed up and stayed up and stayed up and stayed up. This is the front. We also noticed that the blue, the back also joined it. Here's the blue coming along here. It joined it. We also have this new yellow and green. This is left and right. This is the relationship, the coherence between the prefrontal cortex and the back of the brain on the left side and the right side. Left and right relationship between the front and the back of the brain, between the self and the world, between the executive control and space and time. And you can see when they first start meditating is that the front and the back became coherent, and then the relationship between the front and the back oscillated. And there was a point here where they became coherent together, it turned out, and then here's a whole period of time here. This is about 4 or 5 seconds where every aspect of the brain, in terms of these 4 coherences which cover most of the area, is completely coherent. And then basically the left and the right fall out, and then they come back together again and join the front and the back. So there are periods of time when the whole entire period of time when the front is coherent, a whole period of time when the back is coherent with it, and then there are periods of time here for about 4 or 5 seconds, and again for about another 4 or 5 seconds, when both the front, the back, the left, and the right are completely coherent. This is what we refer to as total brain functioning. And this is what progresses with practice of transcendental meditation, is that we move from coherence in the front of the brain, and then the back of the brain joins it in time, and then the left side and the right side also join it to create that total brain functioning during meditation. We can continue now and watch until the person stops meditating. We'll find when the person stops meditating. It'll be obvious. Can you see when the person stopped meditating? So let's take a look here. Okay, so again, EEG in the left, EEG in the right, and you can see that they're all coherent here, and then the left and right dropped out, and they came back in together. Left and right dropped out again, came back together again for total brain functioning. So total brain functioning, total brain functioning, total brain functioning, and then big end of meditation, and basically almost all of them drop out and oscillate together, but which is interesting in itself that they oscillate together, but they basically fall back to the waking state average. So there are periods of time during meditation when the brain is completely coherent, and this would be partly related to that pure sense of self, and then maybe a little thought process, a pure sense of the self, maybe a little thought process, pure sense of the self, and so forth. This is one of the values, and what we'll be learning on this course is this really extraordinary ability to watch the dynamics in real time of meditation and see how meditation and our conscious experience unfolds. So here is a screen, a little more complicated, but again, relatively simple at the same time. We've seen before that the beginning of meditation was here, and the end of meditation was right here. And we saw before that the front coherence was up, along with the EEG activity, and that the back was up. Now we also see there are 4 lines here. The front is here, the back is up in here, and then we have the left and the right as yellow and green here. Left and right oscillate in and out. So let's play that back and see how there are moments when the entire brain is integrated. So let's replay that. This is what we'll be doing on the course, understanding this and feeling very comfortable and seeing the mechanics of actual real-time experience of meditation related to EEG dynamics. In this case, in terms of alpha, or self-referral dynamics, across the whole brain. So you can see right here they started meditating. You can see the change in the amplitude here, and you can see that the front in the yellow is staying up as I'm tracing, and the blue also stays up most of the time. But you also see one other interesting thing in this particular picture. Let's just pause for a moment, we'll continue. That although we start meditating, that the front and the back become very coherent immediately. But the left and the right, in other words, the relationship between the left front and the left back and the right front and the right back, they take a little bit longer in this particular case to also become maximally coherent. So that means relationship between the self-referral and the object referral dynamics on the left side and the right side of the brain. The self-referral mechanics of the prefrontal cortex are integrated. The self-referral mechanics of the object referral are integrated. And we see here then that the relationship between self-referral and object referral also get integrated, but in a fluctuating manner, where there are periods where they're not always integrated, and then the entire brain, left and right, front and back, are integrated. The front and back fall out and come back together again. They fall out and come back together again, and so forth. Let's continue watching it. This is what's referred to as total brain functioning. This is very beautiful. You can appreciate this in real time. This is very different from what we normally have done over the last 50 years, where we take, for example, 5 minutes of somebody's meditation, average it out, get a number, and say it's either more or less than eyes closed. But here we see that when they begin meditating, that the front and back become very coherent. And then there are periods of time when the front and back and left and right are coherent. Front and back, left and right, front and back, left and right, front and back, left and right, front, back, left and right. So there are all these micro periods where the brain is completely coherent. Coherent across the entire spectrum of front, back, left, and right. So this is an indication of the development of total brain functioning in individuals practicing Maharshi's transcendental meditation technique. Beautiful. Now here we have something very, very interesting. As we said before, the alpha has to do more with self-referral. And we have alpha coherence here we saw before at the beginning of meditation. And it goes very high and stays remarkably high and then falls away. So we have alpha coherence related more to self-referral. And then we have here 2 more coherences, beta in the middle trace and gamma in the lower trace. The middle trace has to do more with integration, and the lower trace has to do more with object referral. And you can see that as is classically shown, that the frontal alpha coherence goes way up and stays up. But you also notice that there's a very high level of beta and gamma coherence. They're all riding at about, see, the beta is riding at about 60%, and the gamma is riding at about 50%. This is very good and highly unusual for people to have that much coherence. And again, probably indicative of a person practicing transcendental meditation. So in a moment, we're going to come back and show you somebody who, a couple years later, after being on the IA course, has even higher levels of beta and gamma coherence. So we'll come back in just a moment. So now let's watch and see what happens when this person, several years later, after practicing transcendental meditation in the city's program, being on the IA course, we again have the alpha coherence, beta coherence, and gamma coherence. And they're about to start meditation. And notice they've started meditation. The alpha coherence is high as you'd expect and is usually found with meditators. But look at the beta coherence. It's also above 90%, and the gamma coherence fluctuates around 90%. So here's a consequence of the practice of transcendental meditation, is that just by using this simple technology of Maharshi's, one is able to, I put it on pause, one is able to develop coherence across the entire frequency spectrum and the entire brain, front and back, left and right, across the alpha, self-referral, gamma, object referral, and beta, more of a connecting point. So we have sort of this full range of Rishi, Devata, and Chandas. The self, the object of experience, and the integration and connection. Alpha, beta, and gamma. And this shows that Maharshi's technology develops the full range of brain functioning into its most refined, most integrated, most coherent state. This is very beautiful and a great blessing of Maharshi's program. So let's show this again with a replay. Again, we have at the top alpha, in the middle is beta, and the bottom is gamma. We're having a faster timeline now, so things seem to be moving faster. That's only because we're showing less data per screen. Notice how the left and the right side of the prefrontal cortex are now integrated for all 3 frequencies: self-referral, object referral, and connecting, alpha, beta, and gamma. And this goes on for the duration of the meditation. Again, this is an indication of a very high level of refinement of brain functioning. It's not often seen in practicing individuals practicing transcendental meditation, but we have seen it in individuals who are long-term meditators, and especially if they're on the IA course. So we'd expect Purusha Mother Divine would have similar characteristics from their long periods of meditation. But look at that beautiful line. It's just quite extraordinary to see that. Beautiful. On the average, close to 100% of the alpha coherence, self-referral, very high levels of beta coherence, connecting, and very high levels of gamma coherence, object referral, functioning. So from one simple effortless technique, we get the entire range of coherence in the brain organized for the development of higher states of consciousness, enlightenment.
So if we have the next slide, please. I apologize. So it turns out that when we were seeing this simple short montage of different brain activity during meditation, that we think, God, it's really clear that something remarkable is happening in people practicing TM. And I want people to know that this is actually all very simple in terms of understanding the basics. And it's a delight to be able to understand and to express what's going on in the practice of TM. Next slide. So let's just take a moment to review what we did, what we just saw, that the brain has, you could say, the front area, and it has a back area. That's what we're looking at in the live EEG. And the front has its EEG. This is the CEO, or more self-referral area, the pre-frontal cortex. And the back of the brain, parietal cortex, is more to do with space and time, the construction of our objects, the content of consciousness. Next slide. And we can take the EEG of these two parts of the brain, and we can break it down into component elements from delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma, and so forth. And each one of these, and we'll learn about this in the course, each one of these has a significance in terms of brain functioning and in terms of cognitive activity and development. Next slide. If we look at just raw EEG tracings, you can see it's rather complex, but that complexity has underlying it simplicity. Next slide. And that simplicity can be brought out in the practice of TM. On the left-hand side, we see the same two traces for the front, the CEO, and the back, the world. And this is during waking state, which is primarily object referral, where attention is on objects. If we practice TM, then we go to the right side. And here we see the classic screen we've known for many, many decades now, that the practice of TM results in a more self-referral style functioning of the brain. The brain can either be more object referral or more self-referral or an enlightenment, a blending of the two in their infinite capabilities. But we can see on the right that meditation has very simple alpha waves. That's about 1 second across on the right-hand side. There are about 8 waves, so that's alpha, slow alpha. And you can see it's very high. And you can also see that's what's going on in the front, self-referral CEO, and what's going on in the back, the object referral world area of the brain, that they're basically doing the same thing. They're going up and down together. That correlation or coordination, that's coherence. That indicates that they're very closely coupled and doing basically the same thing. That means they are unified at this alpha coherence, and we'll understand why alpha coherence is so important. And next slide, we'll understand that this brain coherence is an example of how the diversity of brain activity gets unified. And it's that unification of brain diversity, the diversity of our desires, diversity of our emotions, diversity of our perception, diversity of our physiology, how all this huge diversity described by Rajaram in the structure of Ved in our physiology gets unified by using these tools of Maharshi. Next slide. And we know, of course, that the center of this effort, or the center of this effortless path, is this prefrontal cortex, and where coherence, integration, and self all become elaborated and then coordinate across the entire fabric of the brain. Next slide. And when that happens, then with modern research over the last 30, 40, 50 years, David Orm Johnson and Raja Dilbeck and Keith and Fred, everybody contributed tremendously to understanding that brainwave coherence, especially in the front, is indicative of everything good in life, every good quality we want in life when the brain becomes unified, unifying that diversity. Next slide. So we can see that there are techniques will give an experience. And we saw from the experience of transcending, we had a specific brain effect, that the prefrontal cortex became very coherent, the back became very coherent, the left side could, and the right side. In other words, there were moments in which the entire brain was effortlessly, quietly oscillating at that one simple beat frequency of the self that we consider the slow alpha. And the benefit from that is everything good in life. Now, we know that every technique is different. Technique of things we do in our life give different experiences and therefore different benefits. Next slide. And so we can share the same idea across different meditative experiences. We know there are primarily thousands upon thousands of different techniques that could be found in the world, and there are hundreds that are known today. But in recent decade, we find that there may be 3 classes or styles of meditation. And this has all been published now. We thank Fred Travis and Jonathan Shear for helping put this together. That there is focused or concentrative types of meditation would keep you on the surface of the mind, the conscious mind. There are more open monitoring or checking out or watching the body kind of techniques. And they also keep you on the surface of the mind because both focused and monitoring require attention allocated to objects, whether they're mental objects or physical objects and so forth. And so they keep the mind on the level of the surface, and therefore the physiology is on the level of the surface. Now there may be some settling and relaxation, but these two are fundamentally different from a third category, which we know so well, transcending. And it is this transcendental technique which you just saw. The next slide. So what we just show in a short little vignette of the EEG is global coherence and the development of total brain functioning. We saw it across the cortex, the front and the back, left and the right. In other words, the entire expanse of anatomy, which we're going to study in the course, and across frequencies, across the alpha, beta, and gamma. So we have it across time and space. We have it across the dynamics of anatomy and across the dynamics of function. This is why we call this total brain functioning. It takes the wholeness of life and integrates it. It brings a grand unity. This is what is transcending. This is uniqueness of Maharishi's technologies. This is the gift of Gurudev and the constitution of the universe. Next slide. So in summary then, we can see that if you just pick 3 of the brainwaves, alpha, beta, and gamma, the alpha has more to do with self-referral, subject referral, as it's used in the research literature. The gamma and the much faster things are used to help create all the objects or content of our consciousness and awareness, therefore object referral. And the beta is important in bringing different territories of the brain together as well. So in the class, all these things are going to be very simple, very well understood. You'll understand how they are created, how they interact, what they may mean, the development of research. And the next slide, we can see that just by looking at 4 electrodes, the 2 front, F3 and F4, and the 2 back, P3 and P4, we can see how you or the CEO or self-referral is functioning in life and in meditation. And we can see in the back how the world and how space and time is being constructed in your life and in your meditation. And of course, when we follow a person over time, we can take their EEG over year after year after year, and you can see this pattern of development where there's more and more coherence across the entire brain that corresponds to the person's growing experience of silence and bliss and success in life. The next slide. So in summary then, for every technique in life, no matter where aspect of life, but in terms of meditation, we know that every technique gives rise to a specific experience. And every experience will generate a unique brain effect. And therefore, the brain effect of transcending, giving rise to global brain coherence, total brain functioning, will create the most holistic, most effortless, and the most wide-read spectrum of benefits on the level of mind, body, emotions, and behavior. The next slide.